back in the sewing room today and I'm going to show you how to make an apron. And it's going to look like this, and you may recognize this from my baking videos. And it's a totally reversible apron with a pocket in the front on each side. It has an adjustable neck strap, 2 ties on the side, and an optional ruffle. So let's get started. The supplies that you'll need for the apron is 1 yard of each of your fabrics. And I've picked out this pepper fabric and then a coordinating red fabric, which this is kind of a batik type fabric. And then the other supply that you will need is 2 D-rings. And that's all you'll need. I've pre-cut my fabrics. And I've cut my main fabric for the apron at 25 inches wide by 28 inches long. And you can totally adjust that depending on your preference. You're going to have 2 neck ties. One is a short one, and that's cut at 2 inches by 8 inches, and one is 2 inches by 30 inches. Again, you can adjust that if you want it a little shorter, and you use 1 of each of your fabrics. There are 2 waist ties, and I've cut those at 2 inches by 35 inches, and you'll need 2 of each of your colors. Your ruffle, I've cut this at 3 3/4 inches by 40 inches. Now, you can make the ruffle of 4 inches, but the way that I was cutting my fabric, I was getting low on this pepper fabric, so I had to shorten it just 1/4 inch. And then the last thing that you're going to make is your pockets. And I've cut those at 7 by 14 inches, 2 of them, 1 in each fabric. The first thing you're going to do is fold your fabric for the main part of the apron in half, wrong sides together. And you're going to cut 8 inches over from the right hand side and 11 inches down. And I've pre-marked it right here. That's what it looks like, and you're going to repeat that with your other fabric. I'll show you that one more time with your other fabric. This is the top of your apron. Here's your fold. Mark it 8 inches in and 11 inches down. The next step is I'm going to sew the waist ties, and I've already done one. So you can see it's 1 color on one side, 1 color on the other. And I've finished this edge because this edge is going to show. This other edge, it's a little raw because that's going to be tucked into your apron and will not show. So the way I did this is really easy. I just took the 2-inch pieces of fabric. Again, they were cut at 2 inches by 35 inches. Right sides together. I'm going to sew along one edge to make it one piece. I have my 2 pieces sewn together. And you're going to do the same thing on each of your ties. And I'm going to press this seam open. Because I want the tie to have one color on one side and one color fabric on the other side, this is how I do that. Fold in each side to meet the middle and give it a press. And I'm going to keep pressing it all the way down. I have each side pressed toward the center. The last step is to fold it again. So now you have one fabric on one side and one on the other. And then I'm just going to give it one more press before I stitch it down. Okay, I'm going to just tidy up and clean up some of these threads. On one end of your tie, of each of your ties, you need to fold in the end, give it a press, so you have a finished end. And continue with your folding like you did. And you're ready to stitch. The next step is I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch from each side all the way along and on one of the ends. I have my 2 waist ties completed. One color on one side, one on the other. And I have one end of each of them finished. I repeated that same exact technique to make the neckties, one at 2x8 and one at 2x30. And now I'm going to move on and show you how I made the pockets. I'm making one pocket from each fabric. This one I've already completed, and I'll show you how I did that. I started with my fabric at 7 inches across by 14 long. I'm going to fold it right sides together. And I'm going to sew with a 3/8 inch seam, my regular presser foot, all the way around, and I'm going to leave about a 3-inch gap here for turning. So I've sewn all around the edge, the 3 edges, and I've left this gap right here for turning. And I'm going to clip these 2 corners so there's a little less bulk. And now I'm just going to flip it right side out. The last step I'm going to do on the pocket is I'm going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch along the very top. And you can see I've already done that with this one. And that's the last step before we attach them to our apron. And I'm using a little leader fabric so the bobbin thread does not bunch up on the back side. I like to use the contrasting fabric on my apron panel, so I'm going to use my peppers and put them on my red fabric. And all I did was fold my apron panel in half to find the center, and it's right here on this crease. And then I fold my pocket as well and just kind of finger press it there to make a crease. Line those 2 creases up, so that's pretty centered. It doesn't have to be exact, of course. And then I'm going to place it about 8.5 inches from the bottom of my apron. I'm just going to secure it with a couple of pins. I'm going to take it to the machine. I'm going to sew it on each of these 3 sides 2 times, one at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and one at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so it's nice and secure. Now we're going to assemble the ruffle, and I'm placing fabrics right sides together, and all I did was flip over the ends about 1/4 of an inch and pressed. And if you're using a directional fabric like these peppers, make sure that when you sew, we're going to sew these together along here, just make sure that your fabric is upside down. And I'm just going to sew 1/4 of an inch seam all the way along. I have my seam. I'm going to press it flat, and I'm going to press toward the pepper print fabric. It's all pressed. I'm going to flip it over, fold wrong sides together. Now give it a press this way. The last thing I'm going to do to prepare my ruffle is I'm just going to sew each end from here to here again with a 1/4 inch seam. Now I'm going to attach the ruffle to my apron piece, and you can attach a ruffle to either piece, it doesn't matter, just attach it to the front. And since I'm doing the red piece and the pepper trim, you want to position the raw edge to raw edge with these 2 colors the same, because when you flip it down, then your peppers will show, and you can notice they're going in the right direction because of the way we sewed the ruffle. So you want to attach one end about 1/2 inch in, because when you attach the other side of the apron, you need to make sure this does not get caught up in your seam allowance. So I'm just going to put a pin there. Again, I have my middle crease, and I creased the middle of my ruffle. I'm just going to position that there. This is not going to be a perfectly symmetrical ruffle, but just to get it somewhat even. Again, I'm going to stay away from my edge, leave a good 1/2 inch there, pin that, and then to make the ruffles, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. I'm just going to pull up this side to the middle, and I'm going to pinch. It's about, I don't know, maybe 1/2 inch there that I'm pinching, and I'm going to pin it. Now I have half here. Again, I'm just going to pinch it. And pin it. Now I have this portion here. Just going to hold it up to the middle, pinch, and place it about halfway between my pins. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You really can't tell when you're wearing the apron that these are not all symmetrical. But you can play with it to get them to look how you want them to look. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side, and I'll meet you at the sewing machine. I'm attaching the ruffle to the one side of the apron with just a 1/4 inch seam. Now I'm going to pin my straps in place, and this is my shorter neck strap. I'm going to insert it into the 2 D-rings, like so. And I'm going to pin it in place at least a 1/2 inch away from this edge right here. And it does create a thick seam, but you'll be able to sew over that. And here's the other neck strap. Again, at least this is about 1 inch away, but at least a 1/2 inch away from the end. These are your side ties. From this angle here, you want to go at least a 1/2 inch below that, pin. Repeat on this side. Now I'm going to take it to the machine and tack down each of these ties. I'm going to pin my other panel right sides together. Before I do that, I'm just making sure I have my ties tucked in. I have my ruffle tucked in. I'm going to lay that like that, and I'm going to pin all the way around, leaving about a 4-inch gap over here on the side to turn it right side out. I'm leaving a gap from here to here where the double pins are, so I'm going to start sewing right about here. I have changed my presser foot to the 3/8 inch presser foot. Now I have this gap here where I had to turn right side out. So I'm going to top stitch around the entire apron with about 1/4 of an inch top stitch. I've switched to my 1/4 inch quilting foot, and I am going to pull the bobbin thread to the top because I don't want to risk having the bobbin thread bunch up on the back of the apron. So I'm just going to go all the way around the apron with my 1/4 inch seam. Go ahead. Here's the finished apron. Here's one side and your reverse side. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. It's a really fun sewing project, and it's a great project to do with kids as well. If you'd like written instructions, just leave me a comment and I'll get those to you. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.